Hi there and welcome to another ALPS webinar. My name's Sue. I am going to take you through analysing your mocks in Connect Interactive today. I'm going to use Year 13 as a template, but the same applies if you're looking at Year 11, and in fact if you're looking at any internal examination point, you can use some of the tools and some of the questions and things in this webinar to help you get the most from Connect. So as I say, I'm going to look at Connect Interactive in a moment. We're going to swap over there. I am going to focus on the monitoring accuracy area because it tends to be an area that's overlooked. And then just kind of pulling out some questions that you might think about and you might want to ask of your subject leaders during your reviews of the mocks. And I'll point you in the direction of some checklists and things to help you. So I'm not really going to focus on big tools in Connect Interactive today. So if you're unfamiliar with some of the aspects of Connect Interactive, do have a look at those webinars. And the third one there, I have got a lot of different short videos on the ALPS Champion homepage, and they are short. They're sort of 2 minutes long, and they're focused on one particular aspect, the what if, for example, or the how do I. So if you're struggling with anything, I would advise you to go there and have a little look at some of those little videos. Okay, just before we get started then, a couple of other resources that you may or may not have spotted on the Champions homepage. First of all, the checklists. Now these are our big checklists. There are 4 for different roles across the school or college. And they cover the whole academic year, so it's just really kind of teasing out some questions that you might want to ask of each other during reviews, and sort of to try and help embed the same language across the school or college. So you'll notice the 4 there, and the fact that it starts with results days, but on the back there is monitoring and a series of questions to go with that. We've got an ALPS Champions handbook, which hopefully you've accessed on the webpage. Section 6 in particular is the one I'd look at. It's in year monitoring, and I've got a paragraph or a page in there on raw mocks and specifically the analysis of that. There are specific monitoring checklists in there, and those just tease out again some questions to do with monitoring in Connect Interactive. And there finally is the ALPS cycle. So that just gives you a kind of at a glance look as to what we've got going on in terms of support. I'm sitting here now sort of looking at the spring term, phase 1 of the spring term here, which has got your mock exam outcomes. And the ongoing monitoring heading up to the sort of final push around about the mid to end of this term. Okay, so let's get started. What I'm really going to focus on is I'm focusing on 2 grade points, so that's 2 submissions into Connect Interactive. What I've got is I've got my raw mock grades. So what I've asked my teachers to do is to actually just put into my MIS the actual raw mock grades that the students got, in this case in the January exams. And I've asked them to be specific about that, to just have the raw grades and not any additional information there, so we can just see it in its true form, if you like, what they achieved in those mocks. And then on top of that, I've got a second grade point, which is a predicted or teacher assessed or professional grade, whichever you like to call it. Basically that most likely grade. What's the grade that you would bet your bottom line on coming out of that envelope at the end of the results season? So I've got those 2 grade points, and we're going to go into Connect now, and we're going to look at those 2 side by side and just see what tools I can use in Connect to analyse them. So if I just pop in there now. Okay, so what I've set up is I've set up 2 grade points. So I've just using these 2 just to keep it simple on the screen. And you've got year 13 mocks, so that's the January mock, and MP2 is my teacher assessed professional predicted grade that's arising at the same time. So they've both gone onto the system at the same time, but they're measuring two slightly different things, or two very different things. Now you can see then that the mock grade point is bluer, which you potentially wouldn't be surprised by, and you'll notice that none of my BTECers did any mocks in January, so forgive me, I'm just going to focus on this A-level glut here. Okay, so I'm looking at down some of these subjects here. I'm seeing blue, which again, as I say, I'm possibly not surprised about. What I'm interested in is looking at the difference between the two grade points. Now, I'm going to look at colour, which is going to jump out at me first, but I would urge you as well, and you may look at the grade, but I would urge you as well to look at the score difference, okay? Now, the best way to do that, if you don't mind me jumping around, is to go back home, keep those two grade points on, and I'm going to jump into the monitoring accuracy area, okay? Now you will notice here that I'm in trends historical, and what that means is going to give me the difference, or between any two grade points, and you'll notice that it's actually telling me what those differences are too. Okay, so I am looking for where my difference between the two grade points might be concerning, shall we say. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort by the highest to the lowest difference. Now if we look at history here then, we've got 9 entries, and that difference is 0.18. Now, 0.2 is 1 grade per student. Okay, so what the history department are in effect telling me is that the difference between the mock raw results and the MP2 or the predicted outcome that they're saying at the end of the year is a grade per student. Now that might be perfectly realistic, okay, but it's just raising some questions in my mind as to what I might focus on in my line management meeting with the head of history. So show me how that 1 grade per student difference is going to come about. Similarly, you've got equally as big a gap in sociology, and in fact the sociology department for their mocks, that just did not go well for those 35 students, but they're actually, and this is a different concern, predicting a grade 8. Okay, so I suspect that you're going to be a little bit nervous about that, a bit concerned. So it's a totally different conversation. It's a big gap, but it's really, are we heading for an 8? How can we support them in making a better job of that paper? Some other notables then, physics is rising from a 6 to a 3, so a 0.13, so about 3/4 of a grade different. Just to go through that 0.2 is a grade per student, so 0.15 is 3/4 of a grade, okay? So they're predicting a red outcome from the grade 6. Similarly, computer science are too, but that's less than half a grade of a difference, so you might be less concerned about that. So basically you can see some patterns. Economics, by the way, spot on. So there are just questions that potentially are arising from that monitoring accuracy area. Now, if I flick to this trends in year, okay, then I start to see some graphs. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop into my grade selector here, which is that blue lozenge at the top. I'm going to tick year 13 in, I'm in the mix and match tab. Tick year 13 because that then just filters out all of the other year groups and just leaves me with my year 13 grade points. And I'm going to add to this comparison 3, I'm going to add last summer's outcomes. Okay, so exam 2018-19. Now, I know that it is a different cohort of students, but I'm just interested to see how the predictions are faring. Okay, I could even add in last January's mocks. We may do that in a moment. So let's just OK that. So what I'm now seeing is 3 grade points. And so I can now look at those subjects where I had some concerns a moment ago. Okay, so history was the first one with its jump from 0.8 to 0.98. But look at what they got last summer. I know it's 22 different students, but they got a grade 4. So the 5's probably quite realistic. Hopefully is realistic, if that makes sense. Meanwhile, we also talked about sociology, and sociology department got a grade 3 last year. So I'm really now very concerned about that grade 8, and I'm going to want to have another little look at it in just a moment. Physics we talked about. Now look at physics. Physics was a grade 6, predicted a 3, and they did actually get a 4 last summer, so that's potentially realistic too. So can you see, hopefully, that by looking at that picture there, you're starting to get some feel for some of the questions that you might ask. Okay? Now, we can let's just pop into sociology for a moment. There are 2 sociology classes here, and by clicking on them, you'll see that I can just superimpose my 2 teaching sets over that main teaching analysis. So I'll just do that again. I did. So that was the overall sociology, tick sociology 1, A, and sociology C is there. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy between the predicting in those 2 classes, not a lot. Back to the monitoring then. I was there. Let's just add January last year. Okay, so tick year 13. I'm just going to add January mocks from last year and just have a look at whether sociology were being equally pessimistic. So they were equally as pessimistic last year about their outcomes. So maybe I need to talk to them about realistic predicting in a positive way, actually, being a little bit more hopeful on their students' outcomes. Meanwhile, the chemistry department were really struggling last January and got to a 6. So again, I'm starting to feel that that's probably quite realistic. Finally, the history department, again, last January, they were equally as concerned by the mocks, and they pulled it out of the bag at the end of the year. So you can see by just adding in different grade points, you can start to build up a picture. Now, it does presume that you have those grade points in Connect Interactive. You can ask your data managers to add historical data into the system if you want to see that picture. I know it's a little bit more work, but you can see that it's actually really powerful in getting that analysis together. Okay. Just finishing off then, let's go back home and into the subject analysis. You'll see that my grade points have been maintained. Just going to pop into sociology just because I have some concerns there. So this is the subject page for sociology, and we can see our grades here. What I want to look at now is I want to look at these mock grades, and I want to look at the students. So that's the students in sociology, but bear in mind that that grade point there is what these grades relate to. So I want to look at their mocks. So I'm just going to flick to mix and match. I'm just going to take away all of those and leave the mocks. Okay, so that's the mock grades. So if I just sort by prior achievement, bring my top prior attaining young people to the top, then I've got minimum expected grades of sort of A's and B's up here, and yet I can see absolutely no B's. My max grade there is a C, and as I just scroll down, I've nothing above a C, and there is only one C. So I might be starting to have that conversation with the sociology teacher about, okay, how much modelling have you done on C grade, B grade and A grade answers in order to facilitate these students being able to access those questions. So you can start to look at patterns of grades, for example, and those questions might actually support something happening tomorrow morning in your lesson or in the sociology lessons tomorrow morning. So it can be really quick to analyse and get something out and say, right, okay, you need to do some B grade modelling in every lesson starting tomorrow or next week. If I want to look at what I need to do, then I can click on this 9 on the thermometer here and drag it up. Let's just be realistic. Let's just drag it out of the blue and drop it in a 6. 16 students by 2 grades, 19 by 1 grade. So that's a big ask. Okay, so I can, if I want to, put the what if on and start to do some analysis on this. It's a big ask, but let's say I just target a C grade. Okay, at the top here, let's just move people to a C grade. I'm just being slightly unrealistic here, oops. But you can start to see just by targeting that C grade, not even going anywhere near the B, can you see that side starting to move up? So it's a way in which during a line management meeting you can actually start to model what the impact might have been on might be on the students in that sociology group. Okay, so if we just finish off then by looking at what sort of questions you might sort of get from your mock examinations. These are all in the handbook really, but just to kind of start thinking about your mock construction. Do all your teachers have external examination questions in their mocks? Is there a good distribution of the different assessment objectives that are taught? Has all the material that's been examined been taught, and you're not testing stuff that the students can't do? The third bullet point down there might be always contentious. Is there a good time for a mock? Possibly not. There are probably going to be more blue, but Christmas revision might not be the most lucrative time of the year for revision. The fourth one's a big one, isn't it? Is that have the students got the skills to be able to access the questions? So command words, and do they understand what a command word's asking them to do? And do they understand how you're going to use the mocks, that's the students and the staff, in terms of how they're going to be analysed and how intervention is going to be determined by the analysis of those mocks. And I talked about the last one, the distribution of questions. Was the exam paper too easy? Was it too difficult? Was there the right distribution across the spectrum of the specification? So hopefully that's just giving you a quick overview, a flavour of what you can do with those grade points in Connect Interactive. Hopefully it's whetted your appetite to get some mock examination grades in there, and looking at the benefits of doing that in Connect Interactive over the next month or so, as you approach February half term. I hope your mocks have gone well. Best wishes for the term. Thanks very much for listening.